Can you just release that pressure in my brain? The skull? Yeah, just get rid of it, bro. I don't even need it.
I don't think this love for me. I don't think you the one for me.
Let's take a look at the most brutal human deaths ever discovered. I'm not laughing at, you feel me? Like, I'm not laughing because of the premise of the video. I don't know. I don't know why I left.
Ever heard of the show 1,000 Ways to Die?
I grew up on this shit, baby. Come on now. If you didn't grow up watching 1,000 Ways to Die, you're probably scared of death now. Listen, I'm not. Okay, when it's my time, it's my time. I don't know what to say.
Well, if you take a look at our 300,000 years of history, you'll soon come to realize that 1,000 isn't nowhere close to cutting it. Try more like 1,000,000, if even that's enough. And through the ages, people have had to endure some pretty painful demises, some of which were definitely worse than others. But thankfully, thanks to technology and general progress,
there's so many ways for you to potentially end. It's insane. It's insane. Dumb ways to die. So many dumb ways to die. Y'all remember that, Jiggy?
horrific endings are becoming less common than they used to be, especially because of just how tough ancient Earth was compared to now. And we can only guess what kind of bowl our ancestors had to go through. But once in a while, we don't have to, as occasionally, researchers will get really lucky at the expense of a seriously unfortunate individual. And we get to see firsthand some of the catastrophic.
This is also the thing is like, do y'all ever think about how unfortunate it must have been to be like one of the first humans on this planet? Like, just think about the fact that like when you got pregnant, it was like a coin toss if you were going to survive that or not, just based off them not having enough knowledge on the human body or just any science, childbirth, nothing like that. Living early days of human history really had to be like top tier ass. Top tier dog shit.
Injuries that ancient people had to endure, and sometimes even survived. But the first case definitely wasn't a survive kind of situation.
Oh my god, Jesus Christ. Oh my goodness.
And unfortunately, is a mode of death still within the realm of possibility, as it was a shark attack. But not just any old shark attack, but rather the first conclusive one recorded in history. An achievement that certainly nobody wants to have, but nonetheless goes to a 3,400-year-old hunter-gatherer from Japan, simply dubbed Tsukumo 24. The discovery was made in 2021 off the coast of the Seto Inland Sea, where researchers located a male human skeleton in really rough condition, being absolutely covered in lacerations at this. Where researchers located a male human
Wait, this is the first dude who ever got attacked by a shark? Brother, I think this is half of his skull down here, and then this is the other half. Unless I'm tweaking. But this looks like the jaw of a human remain, obviously. You know what? I might be tweaking. Found in 2021? What?
skeleton in really rough condition, being absolutely covered in lacerations that spread across his arms, chest, abdomen, and hands. Originally, researchers were quite horrified and confused, as they were so deep that they marked bone, and matched what was seen in wounds caused by metal weapons, not animals or non-metal tools like a stone knife. What's more is that they weren't just looking at a few cuts, and not even a dozen or two, but instead over 500, 790 to be precise.
What? 790? Dude got bit by a shark 790 times without being like completely eaten through the bone? How does that even happen? It had to be like a baby shark, right? Baby shark do-do-do-do-do-do.
And what made everything all the more weird was that the man had belonged to the Joman culture, in which metalwork was absent, meaning it wasn't some deranged serial killer that had caused this with a metal weapon. Therefore, they took another look at the injuries, and noticed this time around that they were V-shaped and identical to those seen in modern-day shark attacks. This, in conjunction to his location, which was on an archipelago, led to the conclusion that a large tiger shark or great white had killed him, and it really did a number on him during the attack, administering multiple injuries that were fatal within their own right, including the fracture or tearing of every rib, the evisceration of his chest cavity and abdomen, and to top it all off, multiple dismemberments, which included both his feet and left hand.
Yeah, that's definitely a way to go out, bro. That is a way to go out that I would not be happy with by any means, bro. If I'm just chilling at the beach, just pretend that there's a corona or something. Hey, I'm in the water, and then all of a sudden I just fall face first into the water because my legs just got completely gnawed off, and now my body's in the water, and the shark come back around and it just eats me whole. Bro, I wouldn't be a happy camper. I would reach my destination in heaven and just be like, really? Like, this is how I'm going out? You feel me? Like, I wouldn't be a happy camper, dog. I'm just saying.
These missing extremities also helped to tell researchers that the poor bloke was alive in the initial attack, since he likely used his hands and feet to defend himself, during which they were then bit off. This got rid of the possibility of the whole thing being a scavenging event as opposed to an attack, but led to a new question.
I'm not sure if y'all know this either, but if you ever get attacked by a shark, I know, very niche. If you ever get attacked by a shark though, what you want to do, you want to take your fist, you really want to aim for that nose first, right? And then as soon as you got them stun locked, you got to flip them on their belly, like flip them upside down, because once you flip them upside down, they can't swim no more. They can't move. They die like that, bro. When you get attacked by a shark, just come back to my page and thank me in the comment section. That's all I'm saying.
Shark had attacked him in the first place, as it was his left leg that bore the most deep bites, heavily implying an unprovoked ambush attack. And the answer was hidden in his bizarre final resting place. Opposed to being found at sea, as one would expect, or in a place that was once submerged, the victim was found in a traditional burial site, and his bodies did not show signs of being in the water for long, meaning that he likely wasn't alone at the time of the attack. And given that the Jomon people were exceptional fishers, the current belief is that a group of people had gone out on a boat to catch fish. At some point during the fishing excursion, the unlucky man had left the boat and got into the water to perhaps spearfish or to simply bring up a catch, not knowing that the spilled blood in the water had attracted a shark, which then swiftly attacked him. Seeing he was in danger and under attack, the others that were with him then came to the rescue and pulled him up.
Since they did get his body back, imagine like they all jumped in the water at the same time and it wasn't even like his fish that caused the shark to pull up. So it's like one of the other dude's fish, the shark just pulled up, attacked him, and the rest of them all just swam towards the shark and started like jumping him type. And that's how they got his body out of the water and back on the raft. Damn. They were savages back then, though. You got to think about it. They used to fight bisons and like, yeah, they were really savages out here, bro.
But it was already too late, and the only thing they could do was bury him, as he likely died well before reaching the shore. Now, if you're planning a trip to Japan, don't panic quite yet. Yes, there are still sharks there now, but the situation was much dicier back then, with a number of known shark teeth implying that their populations were significantly higher than they are now. And this is also reflected by the Jomon culture, which features multiple art pieces that depict various sharks, namely hammerheads and tiger sharks.
Hammerheads
are so ugly that attacks
ugly.
were much more common back then. Now clearly, this particular incident had a rather regrettable ending, but not all horrific injuries ended so poorly, as sometimes ancient humans not only survived traumatic wounds, but even thrived afterwards, as best showcased by the world's oldest known amputation, which dates back to 31,000 years ago. For a long time, researchers have been well aware that amputations occurred before modern medicine, but previously, the oldest known case was only 7,000 years old, involving a Neolithic farmer from Europe. So everyone was pretty excited when in 2020, a group of scientists stumbled upon a much older specimen in Borneo that bore signs of a successful amputation. The individual in question was found in the Liang Tibo cave, and notably was missing its left leg and foot. At first, there was an idea that it was lost in some traumatic accident, which then possibly killed the individual. Yet researchers noticed that not only was the wound extremely clean, but it was also healed and seemed purposeful, and the rest of the leg was partially withered and child-sized, while the specimen overall was clearly a young adult, making an amputation as a child the likeliest scenario. Now, because this took place over 30,000 years ago, painkillers were probably absent, and the amputation would have occurred with a sharpened stone tool.
Oh my god. Ooh, brother. The world's first amputation had to be quite messy. I'm not gonna lie. That had to be like a terrible fate, bro, because you don't even know what's about to happen. It's like the first person that is like, all right, we're gonna remove your arm. Okay, how are we doing this? I don't know. We just take a rock and just cut it off. Like they had no idea how to actually clean the wound. They had no idea how to seal the wound. They had no idea how to do anything. That's gotta be a terrible fate. I'm not gonna lie, he probably died from either bleeding out or bacteria. Like that's it, just infection, straight infection.
Somehow, the ancient surgeon not only managed to finesse their way around veins, arteries, nerves, and tissue, but kept the area completely free of infection, a feat still impressive by modern standards, as some studies report an infection rate of up to 40% after major amputations. And the prehistoric individual went on to survive into adulthood, only dying in their 20s from something unrelated and currently unknown.
See, this is what I'm talking about. How do you do that? How do you do that? Please explain to me, how do people from all the way back then, actual Neanderthals, how do they do an amputation and not lose the person that they amputated on? How does that happen? That's so insane to me, dude. It really is.
But now, this all begs the question, why did they need an amputation in the first place? A possible idea is that it had something to do with the area that they lived, as the terrain surrounding the cave is extremely rugged, elevated, and littered with large rocks and cliffs. Therefore, the person could have taken a particularly nasty fall or got hit by a rock that mangled their leg to the point that amputation was necessary. And while it's thought that they survived for nearly a decade after the incident, it would not have been easy, as they still needed to navigate a mountainous area with just one leg. And therefore, they must have relied quite a bit on others for care, demonstrating one of the earlier cases of human compassion. But alas, we also know that humans in the past, and present for that matter, can be quite cruel. And you'd know this all too well if you saw my recent video about the Neolithic bottleneck. That was a period of unusually cruel violence, which could be downright horrifying to say the least. In one of the worst cases of it,
Bro, I'm not gonna lie, he's kind of losing me with these transitions. He be transitioning from one death to the next death, and I have absolutely no idea when they start. I'm kind of losing focus a little bit. You need to do a little bit better with these transitions, low key.
was seen in the girls of St. Paul Troy, Chateau, France. This grisly discovery involved 3 women who were found buried together back in the 80s, but dated to about 5,500 years ago.
Damn.
And only recently did scientists unveil that a cruel sacrificial ritual had taken place. In total, 3 victims were found, and yet 2 of them were buried in very contorted positions and stuffed into very tight spaces, while being completely covered by heavy grindstones, likely meant to keep them down and from moving, signifying that these 2 had been buried alive and against their will. Furthermore, the positions of their arms and legs suggested that while decayed now, a rope had at some point not only bound them, but tied their legs to their necks.
Brother, this is absolutely nightmare fuel. This gotta be, I mean, this happens now, and that's the scary part about it. Obviously, not with grindstones. Something similar, you know, boulders, big rocks, things like that. This is terrible. And they think it's for a sacrificial reasoning, which is even worse because people who, you know, end other people's lives over sacrifices, they can't see no reason. There's no stopping them because they think that they're doing this for a better reason, which they're not. They're not doing it for a better reason. They're just kind of Neanderthals and idiots, low key.
Them to involuntarily strangle themselves. And coincidentally, mirroring a torturous killing tactic sometimes used by the Italian mafia, named incapacitamento. However, while mafias do it today for revenge against traitors, these Neolithic murders were some sort of agricultural sacrifice, as they were buried in a structure that mimicked a silo grain. And the 3rd woman was buried on top of them, unbound, and above the stones, presumably for symbolic purposes. The location was also quite peculiar, as it was built in a way that during the solstice, the sun would shine directly onto the silo. So in other words, whoever was behind this was quite twisted, yet unarguably well organized. Now, a less organized, but more strange and rare killing took place not so long before this. However, this incident occurred on the other side of the world, and involved the only known prehistoric sapien to be found in a tar pit, the La Brea woman. In case you didn't know, Los Angeles is home to the La Brea tar pits, which is actually an active paleontology site that has served as a predator trap for tens of thousands of years.
Oh shit.
As animals who got stuck in the sticky tar would in turn attract many unknowingly doomed carnivores. And it is believed to be up to 50,000 years old. And through the years, paleontologists have recovered thousands of iconic Ice Age specimens, like direwolves, ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, American lions, mammoths, mastodons, and then primates.
What? I had no clue about this at all. That's actually, like, we're learning some history right now. I'm not gonna lie.
Or rather, a primate. To be specific, a lone woman. Believed to have been between 18 to 30 years old at death, the La Brea woman is a well-preserved skeleton that consists of cranium, mandible, and postcranial material. In life, she likely stood around 4 feet 10 inches, or 1.5 meters tall, and lived some 10,000 years ago, or based on her dentistry, she sustained herself on a diet heavy in stone ground meal that apparently led to tooth issues, and could have caused quite a bit of pain in life. But putting all that to the side, the biggest issue obviously had to do with her being buried in the tar pit. You see, this was quite odd, as Paleo-Indians were definitely well aware that such a pit was dangerous and best to be avoided, which led researchers to suspect that she had a rather nefarious helping hand in ending up there. And upon further examination, they did indeed find that her jaw had actually been broken, while her skull had been fractured and possessed a small hole in it, indicative of a powerful strike. And not one that came from an animal, but rather from a quote-unquote fellow human. Which, if accurate, would make her LA's oldest known murder victim, given the age of the skeleton.
Shit.
And though highly debated, it's been hypothesized that given the location, that she had belonged to the Chumash people. Yet why she was attacked is not known, nor if the attack came from her own group, over personal discourse, or if it originated from a hostile party that was looking for resources, and potentially viewed her as a threat. Additionally, even though her wounds were almost 100% guaranteed to be fatal, given the level of medicine at the time, it's not clear if she had died first and then was dumped in the tar pit, or if she was thrown in there while wounded, but actually died from sinking under and suffocating in the tar.
What I think happened to her, obviously, I would have no clue because, you know, I'm not a scientist or anything like that. I'm not a historian. What I would think that happened is that she was out trying to find some food for the fam or whatever the case is. She might have been alone. She saw another clan, another tribe roll up, and then they got into a scuffle. She got hit in the head with a club or an axe because they think it's an axe. And then she probably fell into the tar pit, or the other tribe threw her into the tar pit. It would make sense, right? You got to think about it. Discarding of the body in a tar pit, nobody's going to go into the tar pit because they know it's dangerous. Therefore, nobody would ever find the body. You could call me smart, you could call me dumb, but you're going to call me right.
Now, obviously, neither are good ways to go. And honestly, I'm not sure if I'd rather get bonked or drown. And unfortunately, though, we know that definitely happened with another specimen, who is now known as the first modern human that we know of to have drowned. And ironically, he did so in one of the driest places on Earth, the Atacama Desert. This harsh and unforgiving region is found in Chile, and is perhaps the oldest desert on the planet, meaning that at any rate, this Neolithic man who dated to 5,500 years ago still lived in the area when it was absolutely bone dry. Yet his body was found in a round stone structure on top of seashells, which does kind of make sense because he lived on the coast, meaning that water was accessible. Originally, scientists weren't sure what happened to him, as he wasn't super old, being about 35 to 45 years old at the time of his death, and he didn't have any clear fatal injury or disease either. However, because he lived close to the sea and was buried with lots of shells, there was a thought that he drowned. But how does one figure out if a 5,000-year-old plus man drowned or didn't, with just bones? And surprisingly, you take a look at those bones and look for diatoms, which is basically any member of a large group comprising of several genera of algae. And alas, diatoms were indeed found in the skeleton.
Bruh, but this is the thing, dog. Like, he's using big ass words, and I'm not an idiot, bro. I don't claim to be an idiot by any means. When it comes to these situations where it's like really scientific, anatomies involved, I'm just kind of slow with it. I'm not good at science. I was never good at science. The fact that you could look at a human remains from 5,000 years ago and determine their death is just, it's so insane to me, and it will always be insane to me. There's no way around that. It will always be insane, in my opinion. This is also a reason that, like, I be feeling like there was water in different places even before Pangea. You feel me? Because, like, how do you drown in a desert? Unless you drowned in sand. That's different. That would kind of make sense. I'm not gonna lie.
Implying that he drowned. And let's just say, that's a very unpleasant sign. Because the only way that diatoms can end up in one's bones is that you inhale water such that when it reaches the lungs, your pulmonary alveoli rupture, where then salt water rushes into your bloodstream before making it into your bone marrow, and hence the presence of these algae.
Wow.
So, a very brutal ending for an already harsh life. As it turns out, the man was already in very poor condition, showing signs of having arthritis bad enough to damage his bones. And his legs are roughed up as well, suggesting a life spent squatting, perhaps to harvest shells. While his arms and shoulders were further messed up, reflecting a life rich in swimming, rowing, and harpooning, which matches the assumption that he was part of a coastal community. And you know, just for a cherry on top, he also appeared to be extremely iron deficient, an ailment that was chalked up to a severe tapeworm infection, which can be common in mishandled fish. And just to make everything a tad bit more tragic, it turns out that he did not die alone, but with 3 others, another male, an adult female, and even one infant. Radiocarbon found that all 4 had died at the same time. But how, you might ask? Well, they lived in a very seismic area, and so it's believed that an earthquake and then a subsequent tsunami is what did them in. But what's rather peculiar is that when they tested the rest of the skeletons for diatoms, they found none, heavily suggesting that unlike the man, they had not drowned. And so now, while it's still possible that an earthquake had killed them from the non-drowning related dangers, it is now less likely that a tsunami and earthquake is what did them in. And the current hypothesis is that the man just accidentally drowned, maybe while diving down to forage, while the others just happened to die around the same time and location from other causes. After all, the Atacama Desert was and is a very grueling place, where it could be hot, cold, and very, very dry. Although it should be said that Earth back then was also just in general tough, disregarding location, and sometimes we humans made it more painful than it already was and had to be. I mean, just take a look at this guy, or this girl, or really any of the other 38 humans found in France with holes in their skulls. What you're looking at is not a mass murder crime.
You see, this is what I'm talking about with this dude's transitions. What? How do you go from that to that? Just out of nowhere.
Scene, or even warfare, but rather a poor attempt at surgery, also known as trepanning, which as the skulls show involved drilling a hole into one's head.
But why? Why? What did you think was gonna happen?
And was perhaps Homo sapiens' first widespread surgery. Unfortunately, the site in France specifically dates to about 6,500 BC, making it one of the oldest, if not the first cases of trepanning that we know of. But it was by no means isolated, and multiple sites have been found with evidence of this strenuous procedure, supplying us with an abundance of brutal fossils, with some studies even suggesting that up to 10% of all Neolithic people underwent this treatment, if you can call it that. And in the French site, it was closer to 33%. And given the super high rates, you'd assume it was pretty safe. But no. It's about what you'd expect from drilling a hole in your head.
Yeah, bro, look at those sizes. When they do like brain surgery now, the probability of actual survival is so low. Think about back then, every single person who's getting a hole in their skull is probably just not surviving. It is what it is. That's so weird to me that they even thought that this was gonna work out though, I'm not gonna lie.
Less than 40% of the skulls showed any signs of
especially after the first one, why would you just continue doing it, you know?
healing, meaning more than 60% died, with the main ways of death likely being infection, blood loss, and of course, trauma to the brain if the surgeon went too deep. And even if they were in the metaphorical clear, healing was no joke, often taking several months for the area to close up. And even then, it was likely you'd still feel awful. Plus the fact you had to endure the surgery itself, which definitely took place with no painkillers or anesthesia. Now, to do the surgery, it's thought that sharpened stone knives, or in some cases even seashells, were used to carry out the procedure, and people at virtually every age were found having done this. And so looking at the widespread nature of this procedure, you might ask, what was the purpose of this? Well, basically anything, according to some. Potential reasons included spiritual purposes, treatment for epilepsy, relieving head wounds, which were more common at the time, courtesy of ourselves, or it could have been done for something as simple as a headache. So basically,
brother, I got a little headache right now. Do you think that we can could just open it up real quick? Can you just release that pressure in my brain? Yeah, the skull? Yeah, just get rid of it, bro. I don't even need it. Like, bro, what were they thinking back then? That's the shit.
If you wake up in ancient times and you have a throbbing migraine, best to keep that to yourself.
Yeah, GG.
And perhaps surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, this surgery remained popular for quite some time, and actually is still carried out today, just with a bit more precision and only done in select cases. Not to mention, we now have much better management for the procedure.
I'm not gonna lie, bro. If I needed like a brain surgery or like they had to cut a piece of my skull off, bro, I don't think that I would be okay with it. The reason that I say that is because I saw the last Saw movie, I think it was Jigsaw, and they had to cut like their skull open. Oh, brother, no. I'm good. Just let me die. Honestly, just let me die.
And speaking of pain, that's something we seem to have left behind too. Of course, it's still a thing. But I more mean that life used to be so much more harsh and agonizing due to lesser technology. I mean, just ask the girl of Ukter-Moor, affectionately known as Mura.
Throw the whole
some.
person away.
She is an Iron Age specimen that is also
Girl of the Ukter-Moor. This is a new case that's being led on right now. Really don't like how this guy does his transitions. It's not hitting for me.
so a bog body. In other words, a human that was found and sometimes naturally mummified within a peat bog. And just in case you're wondering what that is, it is a wetland that has accumulated peat, surprise surprise, and other decayed organic
peat?
material. Now Mura was originally located in the year 2000, And her founders actually thought that she had been a girl that went missing after visiting a club many decades before. But after doing some testing, they realized that she was in reality a 1,000-plus-year-old skeleton who had lived in Iron Age Germany, and despite only being around 17 to 19, had endured more pain than most in their lifetime. Just about every bit of her body had some sort of damage to it. And even looking at it as a whole, researchers concluded that she must have led a life of intense physical labor, probably consisting of carrying heavy loads like water jugs as she routinely navigated through the marshlands. Then, her head had not one, but two severe fractures that had healed over, demonstrating brain injuries that might have come from attacks by hostile people or even people within her own community.
This woman went through some shit. This woman done got fucked up a couple times. Quite a few. Jesus Christ.
With her shape reflecting blunt impacts. And we do know that head trauma and violence were a bit more common during the Iron Age. But at any rate, she definitely survived that specific ordeal. Yet she likely suffered from frequent headaches and potentially other neurological symptoms. And it really seems like she couldn't catch a break, because she also appeared to have a benign tumor at the base of her skull that likely just compounded on her already existing headaches, while also causing a curvature in her spine, leading to back pain and chronically inflamed legs, which was severe enough to alter her bones. And while her own body seemed to be against her, so did the environment, as there were further signs that during harsh winters, she endured frequent periods of sickness and in her childhood had chronic malnutrition.
This woman, whoever she is, had an absolutely grueling life. I'm not gonna lie. Just not good at all.
Reflected by the unusual morphology of her bones. So in other words, each day would have been a challenge for her, even if she didn't have to do anything, let alone survive during the Iron Age. And she clearly did not last long, because even 19 was considered below the life expectancy, which at that point hovered at around 26 years old. Now, we don't know what killed her, but it's believed that thankfully, murder was off the table, considering that there are no clear signs. And right now, it's tentatively believed that she died in a freak accident. However, one mystery that remains is that she was found alone and naked, with not even any objects or jewelry being associated with her, suggesting that someone had altered her body after death, and then presumably buried her into the bog. Which again makes one wonder, why?
Damn.
Why not just bury her on land? And the answer is that maybe they were trying to hide something. And sadly, not even in death did Moore get a break, as when she was recovered back in the day, it was done accidentally after a machine had scooped up her remains, but not before ripping them into 100 different pieces that needed to be stitched back together. So with that example alone,
bro, this woman had a terrible life. She had a terrible death, and then she had a terrible discovery. That is terrible. That is an absolute, that's so shitty, man. Even your spirit just has to feel so bad in death. You have to be like, really? Really? Like, why me? What did I do? Well, we'll never know.
I think we can conclude that life can really just be dang hard, which is a fact shared by what is currently the first known victim of the plague, a 5,000-year-old hunter-gatherer from present-day Latvia. He showed signs of having died around the age of 20, and likely did so after being bitten and infected by a rodent. That unassuming bite would one day come to doom him, as it happened to be laced with a bacteria that humanity knows all too well, Yersinia pestis. In other words, the bacteria responsible for the plagues, like that of Justinian and the Black Death. So, not good. Now, when you get the plague, it usually comes in 3 different forms: pneumonic, septicemic, and bubonic. And while we don't know which one the man had, it clearly killed him, and unbeknownst to him, would proceed to kill over 100 million other people through the years. Which is crazy. I mean, seriously, nature just seemed to be more messed up back then. And I already know I mentioned it, but we as humanity seem to follow that trend, especially during the Neolithic. And there's a buffet of mimed skeletons to choose from that time. And that pun is intended because many of them showed signs of cannibalism. Additionally, we also have nicely preserved specimens that show us that one could go through dismemberment, decapitation, being burned alive, stabbed, bludgeoned, shot with an arrow, or sometimes a combination of all these things together. And obviously, while violence still occurs, in many ways it is comparatively much more tamed in the present. And I should also mention, there is also the trend of doing this to large groups, as well over 100 mass murder sites are known from throughout the world, showcasing ancient man's enthusiasm for violence and creativity and cruelty. Maybe the takeaway is that for all the flaws of the present, maybe today isn't so bad after all.
Bro, that's so insane. And just to go off of that last story right there, like, I'd never really known what the exact virus was. I didn't know that it had like that deep of a name. I thought that it was just called like something, the Black Plague or Black Death, whatever. I'm a little dumb when it comes to certain science and history lessons, but that's just insane. Can't it still happen? Like, yeah, we had, you know, the 19 take over for a little bit right there, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been, you know? Hopefully no crazy virus comes out from the icebergs, because obviously global warming's taking over and that is causing the icebergs to melt, and there is probably millions of viruses and diseases inside of that water over there that nobody knows about. So hopefully we survive. With all that being said, I hope that you guys did enjoy today's reaction video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know in the comments section if you want another video like this, and I will talk to you guys later. Take care.
I don't think this love for me. I don't think you the one for me. I don't think you see me when you fucking up all in your dream. I don't think you got trust for me. Just ain't what I see.